Let's talk about Miranda Hart for a second, and particularly Lyme disease. She's been told that, or she's been telling people that it's left her bedbound. You know Miranda Hart? Comedian, actor, own TV show, Call the Midwife, that kind of stuff like this.
Welcome to UPD Delivery. If you would like to arrange redelivery, press 1. Please state clearly when you would like the package redelivered.
Tuesday.
Did you say...
Monday?
No, who are you?
I'm sorry, we couldn't identify.
Tuesday.
I'm sorry, did you say...
Thursday?
Tuesday. I mean, I literally can't make it any clearer. Tuesday.
You've gone too posh now.
When would you like the package redelivered?
Tuesday, innit?
Did you say...
Tuesday?
Yes.
Miranda had symptoms of fatigue for years, and she's traced the condition back to when she was a teenager. She was 14 when she first got the tick-borne illness. She's had symptoms ever since, and she's had moments of being confined to her home for long periods. Said there were times where she'd look at a glass of water and wonder how she was going to pick it up. It sounds horrible. So what is Lyme disease and what should we know about it? Natasha Metcalf is co-founder and chair of Lyme Disease UK and with us this morning. Good morning, Natasha. Thank you for coming on to talk about this. I think people in this part of the world might know a thing or two about Lyme disease because John Caldwell, who lives locally, has spoken about it and his own family's experiences with it. What is Lyme disease and how can you catch it?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Well, Lyme disease is a bacterial infection transmitted by the bite of an infected tick. So not every tick will have Lyme disease, but a sort of a percentage will do. And what happens is when it attaches to you for a blood meal, unfortunately, it sounds horrible, but it can regurgitate its stomach contents while it's feeding. And then that's how the bacteria gets transmitted.
I'm going to clip this bit and play it to my daughter later, who has this habit in the summer of wandering around fields in very short shorts. I keep telling her, put some trousers on precisely because of this. Is that one of the easiest ways to protect ourselves?
It is for sure, but of course it is hard to do in the hot weather, especially when we don't have that much of it in this country. We're tempted to kind of strip off and enjoy the outdoors. But yeah, sort of longer trousers, particularly if you're going to be going into long grass and woodland, tucking your trousers into your socks, which isn't always the best look, but that can also be very effective if you know you're going to be in a sort of prevalent area for ticks. But if you happen to be in shorts, sometimes it's unavoidable. Checking yourself when you get home is really, really important. Being aware that ticks can be as small as a poppy seed, and they really like areas that are hard to find. So things like behind your knees, behind your ears. So it's really, really important to check thoroughly. Use a mirror if you need to, if you haven't got somebody to help you check. And obviously check your pets as well.
A couple of points on this then. First of all, if it's hard to imagine that something the size of a poppy seed can do something so debilitating. But if it's bacterial, I mean, we're talking microscopically small. If it's caught early, if you realise you've got a tick on you, what should you do, first of all?
Well, first of all, the key thing is to remove it safely because you can actually reduce the chance of transmission if you're not distressing the tick. They tend to kind of transmit the disease if they're distressed when they're being removed, as well as, they can transmit it earlier, but that tends to be a time where you are in danger. So learning how to correctly remove it. Don't use anything like a match, Vaseline, or anything not designed to do the job. There's lots of advice online on how to safely remove it. A lot of people like to have a tick removal tool in their first aid kit, and they sort of operate slightly differently, but obviously check the instructions. A lot of them twist, and that removes the tick cleanly and also doesn't leave any of the tick's body in your system.
If you've got a tool that you bought for a pet, will that work on a human?
It should do. They all seem to be pretty similar.
We're all mammals, aren't we? So
yeah, so it's exactly. They tend to work in exactly the same way. But obviously looking out for anything strange. If you've been in a sort of high exposure area and you feel anything like summer flu or anything that isn't sort of adding up with bugs going around, but particularly if you see any kind of strange rash on your body, that can be delayed. It doesn't always appear straight away, which can be confusing because you might not relate it to that time in the woods. But if you have a rash called an erythema migrans rash, there's lots of examples online. That means you have Lyme disease. It's diagnostic. So you don't actually need to even have a blood test. You should just be started on antibiotics right away. But the caveat, it's a complicated illness, is that not everybody gets the rash. It's about 2/3 of the people. So you might still have it. And the rash is traditionally a bullseye shape, but it's important to be aware they can be atypical in nature. So it's not always that classic bullseye. But any kind of strange rash, it's worth thinking about whether you have had contact with long grass, woodland areas. But actually now it's getting more and more prevalent even in urban gardens and parks. So it's not always confined to the hot spots like it might traditionally be thought to be, like Scotland or New Forest. It's been found in some of the London parks as well.
Gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
so we need to be careful wherever we are.
We do.
In terms of finding it early, if it's bacterial, is spotting it early a real advantage?
Absolutely. It's almost like two different illnesses. So if you catch it early, you can have a few weeks of antibiotic treatment and then sort of go on to be absolutely fine. But like Miranda's case, like my case, if you're left, then the complications can start because it sort of gets into all the systems of the body. And that's when it can become very debilitating. So catching it early is absolutely key. And sort of being aware of preventative measures like wearing repellent that's effective against ticks is a hugely important one. If you're going out into the countryside or anywhere where there's long grass, woodland, and you're wearing shorts.
Miranda makes the point that she'd look at a glass of water and wonder how she was going to pick it up. I mean, that's pretty severe, isn't it?
Absolutely. It can really do a number on your energy systems. And in my case, I couldn't even remember my date of birth. So it really affected my brain. I had seizures. It was scary. So that doesn't surprise me. Sadly, that issue with fatigue is very, very common in the Lyme community where people have been left. So yes, it can be incredibly nasty and very hard to trace it back to that tick bite. Like Miranda, I had one when I was about 16, and then it sort of decimated my 20s and early 30s because I didn't know what was going on with me. So it can be like two very, very different illnesses.
How good are doctors at spotting this now? We've talked about it a few times on this programme. Your organisation is doing its bit to try and spread the word about it. Are doctors aware? Do they know what to look out for, particularly if the bullseye isn't there? Because, you know, that seems an obvious one, but if that's not there?
Yes, I think it's getting better. We're hopeful, and actually part of our awareness campaign, we ensure that we get leaflets and posters into a huge number of GP surgeries around the country. And I think since they've published the NICE Lyme disease guideline, which was in 2018, there's now a treatment framework for early cases. So it's actually good for patients and doctors to be aware that treatment guideline exists to get that early treatment that's required. So I think it's getting better, but obviously more awareness is needed, and our organisation says, you know, it's not the doctor's fault because they didn't have the training, but hopefully awareness now is growing, which is good to see. And it helps that people are speaking out. It's horrible that ticks don't discriminate between high-profile people or, general public. So it's sad, but it helps with awareness when people speak out like Miranda.
And so if people are listening this morning and thinking, well, hang on, I've had similar symptoms. There are all kinds of things it could be, but it could be Lyme disease and it could be undiagnosed Lyme disease. What should you do? Can you go to a doctor and say, I'm just wondering, could it be?
I mean, it's worth it, but the problem we have is we don't still have accepted treatment protocols for if it's been left. So we're getting a lot better at treating it early, but if you feel you've been suffering for 5-10 years and suddenly it's things are falling into place and you feel like it might be, that's the problem where we're actually pushing for much better research and also treatment protocols because we don't yet have that information. So a lot of people are going privately, which is obviously controversial because then the mainstream won't agree with that. So that's the challenge that we have. It's a relatively new disease. I think it was only discovered in the 70s. So we need a lot more research and funding to get those protocols for people who've been left.
Natasha, great seeing you. Thank you so much for coming on to BBC Radio Stoke and talking about it. The founder and chair of Lyme Disease UK. It's one of those things, as Natasha says there, it just doesn't discriminate. And now it's in people's gardens and parks and places like that, or at least the ticks are that carry it. It's something to be aware of, particularly through the summer months. But again, with Miranda Hart highlighting it today and it being very much in the news. Well worth talking about. Lots of information on the Lyme Disease UK website if you want to find out more about what we've been discussing there.